vote, I write on a piece of paper, I mark it, isn't that countable? That goes into a it goes into a thing, you take it over.
You're only allowed to write on your ballot. I mean, you're only allowed to fill in the box on your ballot.
Yeah.
If you write your name on the ballot, you invalidate it.
Unless you're a write-in.
Well, you can write in a name, yeah, but I'm saying anything that identifies the voter on the ballot invalidates that ballot.
Well, can't they vote those cards that you mark?
The cards that we're talking about two different things. One
Yeah,
is
you're talking about registration cards.
there's an application to vote.
No, not that. When you go and vote, you mark, you make these darken in little spots.
Right,
They go into a thing, you put them in
right, this machine, yeah.
so they can count them, right?
Yeah,
So what's the problem?
But that's what he's saying, is you do an audit of how many registrations there were to vote as to how many ballots got counted. When they go
these
into-
machines don't count accurately.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
These are machines, and they do screw up.
Okay,
That's
here's
the problem.
another question.
Yeah, a while back, over at the Western Washtenaw Tea Party, I think we had a guy from True to Vote. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you're affiliated with them in any way.
No, I'm not.
And I think the guy was from Texas, one of their representatives. And I was explaining how a number of us, as Republicans, would volunteer to be poll challengers and election inspectors at these Democratic strongholds. And my comment back then was, you know, considering all this advanced technology that we have before us, you would think that they'd be able to come up with a system that's foolproof. And where we could get to the point where we're not having to overlook their shoulders and they're not overlooking ours.
Problem is, they have to come up with a foolproof system, except for we're the fools.
Well, the problem is this. Just think about it for a second. If you deposit money in your bank, what error rate is acceptable to you? How much can they make an error in terms of your transactions with a bank?
Half a cent.
You draw the line of the penny, right? But the thing is that there's an error rate on these machines. They don't read accurately.
Keep going, follow.
Yeah, I guess that you could say that no matter how advanced technology gets, there's always going to be somebody that's going to be able to figure it out and screw it up.
Well, let me just point out, Dennis in the start talked about the plane and the finding of a piece of a plane, and he talked about the issue of technology for cloaking, and who knows whether that exists for sure or not. I haven't seen it, but you're talking about it. Who controls the technology is the critical thing. And in voting, who controls the vote, the counting of the vote? Now, in Michigan, right now, the company that repairs the machines, basically controls the machines, is a foreign company. We don't know who they are. We don't know who owns them.
Before we go to this next question right here, Darlene, I'll get back to you. There was patents released on there.
There's what?
Patents released on cloaking.
Oh,
U.S. patents.
I'm not arguing with that.
No, I just defended myself.
I think there's a lot of issues about technology,
Yeah.
but this is,
Here's another question.
More of a comment. If you think about data collection, storage, and manipulation, and how much corporations spend billions of dollars to do so, makes you wonder just how much the politicians spend to do the same.
we know, at least some figures, they're huge. Hundreds of billions.
I was wondering if you know what year the foreign companies started counting our ballots and doing that. What year did that start, you know?
I think we're talking about the early 70s. Yeah.
Well, I understood that the mother company to the Toronto Corporation was in Spain.
Yeah.
Pretty short deals, and maybe you can confirm them. I heard first that before the Civil War, a black lady voted because her husband died and she was a landholder. Is that true?
I don't know for sure about that, but I want to point out the jurisdiction of who decided whether she should vote or not vote is decentralized. It depended on where she was in that county. And that's, I don't know whether you agree that that's the way it should be, but that's what's at stake here in Michigan, is whether we're gonna have centralized counting of the vote, where everything is uniform according to these secret machines.
What year was it, and I remember this, and I thought, we're really losing a lot, when the property owner, we used to have two ballots, one for a landholder, and one for the people that didn't own land.
Right.
Because what happened in Ann Arbor was, this, after that ruling was, well, they pay rent, so they're really, part of the deal, So they could vote on your taxes. Before, the only ones that could raise your property taxes were landholders. And then when they allowed the students to vote, and they combined the whole thing, those guys could vote, raise your taxes, and then leave town. You're gonna be paying.
Michael's forte here is the process by which the votes are counted in the remedy. It is important, and he will tell us what he knows about it, but that's not what he came prepared to talk about. But go ahead, Michael.
Well, I do know that there were a lot of issues that went on then, at that time. I remember I was in Ann Arbor for part of that.
How do you feel about it?
Well, I think the thing I focused on, I don't know how I feel about, I think that there are a lot of complicated issues about who should decide what. And one of the things I would like to talk about at some point is the issue of gerrymandering, because I think we really need to come to a decision amongst ourselves. I'm not talking about the politicians or the power groups, but just among ourselves, it's a very difficult question to decide who should decide. When they had the Constitutional Convention and they were trying to figure out how to structure our government, there was a very big controversy about this issue. And some people came down on the side of saying there has to be geographical representation. And that's why they established the U.S. Senate with 2 senators from every state. But the other side...
Voted on, by the way, by the legislatures of the state, not the popular vote.
Well, that was another thing, but the other part of the Congress was to be based on the number of people, a counting of people, and that's how they set up the census. So it's actually the census in the House that's gerrymandered, because the senators, there's 2 from every state, there's no change in that. So it deals with 2 different ways of representation. Now, we're facing a new way of representation, which has to do with money. If you have more money, you have more say-so.
The third thing I want to say.
Hang on, Jim. You've got a very soft voice, and it doesn't pick up without a microphone, so hang on.
I'm getting older and I'm dying. I understand, now maybe you could verify this, that in Canada, I heard that they still all use paper ballots.
I think they do. In many places, they use paper ballots. That's what we're advocating, is paper ballots. I mean, I showed you the price difference.
Well, what is a paper ballot? What I use is a paper. The ballot is paper.
The counting of the ballots is
The
done by
counting of the
hand.
ballots.
Hand counting.
Hand
of
counting.
ballots.
That's the key.
That's what I meant to say.
Well, the last election, the week before, on the Bill Bennett show, it came out over 1,000 ballots were stolen in West Bloomfield Hills, and the Democrat person answered questions, and he asked where did they happen to those ballots. She said they were left off at the post office. But this happened all over the country, where these ballots were stolen, and then some people said they did vote 8 times, stuff like that.
Well, in Detroit, it was really blatant. There was a man running for mayor who was not a resident of the city. There was a whole big pitched battle about that, and then he was declared that he could be a candidate after the closing date. So he was running as a write-in candidate. Now, no one has ever won an election as a write-in candidate before, and his numbers came out fantastic. Now, we trained people, and Mara trained some monitors to watch the counting of the vote. And the, the state of Michigan's laws are very clear that the counting of the vote is to be public. But they brought all the ballots to Cobo Hall, and they had the Detroit police escort the challengers out of the building. Now, afterwards, they were able to photograph a number of the ballots, and you know about how it was a write-in for the mayor? Well, there were a huge number that had exactly the same handwriting for that write-in, with the same spelling mistakes. And that's gone to the courts, but the courts don't want to deal with it. The courts are not really good at following up on this. They don't have a remedy. Certainly he's been elected and he's functioning for some time now. And they're finally getting around to looking at it.
You're talking about
I'm talking about Detroit.
The current mayor?
The current mayor in Detroit.
the batteries going down. I was going to make an analogy between him and the president.
Yeah. There are a lot of situations where the person that's supposedly elected was not elected. And the decisions that are being made, you know, Detroit, I don't know how you feel about it, but there's a lot of information out saying, oh, Detroit really was bankrupt. And they did a good thing by going through this bankruptcy. Well, there's also another argument that Detroit was not bankrupt, and that the state officials stole huge amounts of money from Detroit. And now we look at the fact that there's big problems with the water system. And again, you could argue about this or that, but the fact is...
Wait, are you getting the state confused with Kwame?
No, I'm talking
Because
about...
he really did steal a lot of money from Detroit.
There were a lot of people who stole money from Detroit. I think there are other mayors of the history. And then there's the school board. I actually taught school in Detroit for one calendar year, and I was appalled at what I saw. They, as a new teacher, master's level teacher, I was paid less than they were paying the chauffeurs for the school board members. They had chauffeured cars. And those chauffeurs were being paid at a higher rate than I was.
You know, priorities.
Priorities, yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie The Great McGinty?
I don't think so.
The Great McGinty is totally about all those guys. The guy voted about 50 times. He had the key word whenever he went to any poll. He mentioned this word, and they let him vote again.
Okay, our wireless is dead, so if you're going to speak, you got to speak louder than Jim's able to. He's got such a soft voice.
There are a couple of other topics I want to just touch on.
Okay, maybe I should get a battery. Go right ahead.
One topic is the nuclear topic. Do you know that Detroit DTE is planning to build the largest nuclear plant in the world in Monroe, Michigan? And did you know that we're within 100 miles of that? There's a 50-mile and 100-mile-an-hour zone. The destruction in Japan, you're familiar with, there was a major nuclear accident where they have had to clear 100 miles away. And that would mean that all of us would have to leave our homes forever, or those of us that live in Washtenaw County. So how do you feel about DTE taking a risk with your lives?
Is that Detroit Edison?
Yeah, DTE.
How much would
Edison.
they give me for my home?
There's no plan to give you anything. If they're planning, I mean, the problem with Fermi 3, it has been approved by the Atomic Energy Commission. That's the United States agency that approves these things. What they want to do, first of all, the electric power. Electric power you have to have in Michigan to get through the winter.
I did it.
To get through the winter, you're going to have to have some electric power. So,
I'm off the grid in 2 places.
well, good. Very few people are. But the problem is that nuclear energy is the most expensive you can buy. So it's not that our rates are going to go down because of these new plants; they're going to go up. That's just for the cost of power. Let me make two
Let
other
him
points.
finish his presentation, Jim.
Second point is the way they're going to finance it. Now, I don't know if you guys are all communists or you're a capitalist, or
Excuse me.
you're a socialist, what words you want to use to describe the economy. But what they're proposing is something that I think is objectionable. Normally what happens is a company makes an investment. They're going to build a plant and produce pizzas, or produce electric power, or produce whatever. And the people that fund the building of the plant are called investors. And they stand to get a return on their investment. That's not what DTE is going to do in building this new plant. They're going to charge the ratepayers up front to pay for building this new plant. So the people that are going to stand to make money on it are the people who own DTE, the investors who own DTE. But they're not going to build the plant with their own money.
Wouldn't that have to go to the Public Service Commission under the Attorney General?
Yeah,
It would have to.
it's standing there now.
Now, the governor can do a quasi-public, private called authorities, and he can get around the Public Service Commission like that, but
It may be, but I'm just saying that that's what their plan is right now. The third thing is that they're planning to also collect money to decommission the plant, and they're going to do that up front also. So what we can look at is our electric rates are going to go through the roof. What?
he said it would necessarily go through the roof because of dumping coal.
Well,
But that was because of getting off of coal that he said that.
in fact, if you look at the figures, you'll find that there's a lot of people and industries that have left Michigan. And one of the consequences is we use less electric power. And so you really need to look at the issues about,
We're using less because they've left.
because they've left. And if you look at the cost of a gas-fired plant as opposed to a nuclear plant, it's way less.
Well, I read in the computer that General Electric gave Obama a lot of money, and he turned around and gave them money, or tax money for smart meters, and, you know, all kinds of things, so this, I think, is all has to do with them.
Yeah, the Public Service Commission had to approve the smart meter increase.
Is this part of the deal where they're trying to get rid of the coal plants because they're, because I know, see, I'm a boiler man, I went down to Monroe. They burn a football field full of coal, 9 feet thick every day, that was years ago. But are they trying to eliminate that now? That plant, that plant, made half the electricity that they use in Michigan.
Well, I have to tell you that I don't know the details of all the plants, and I just am aware of this Fermi tree that seems like a very bad idea.
It would make common sense to the commercials that we've been hearing that our folks are being aware of, is there's a huge amount of coal-fired electric plants that they're shutting down. And what you're telling us is something that we have not been told so far, is that they're replacing the capacity that those outputs did with a nuclear, largest one in the history of large, nuclear plant in Dundee, right?
Monroe.
Monroe. So that's good information.
Well, I wanted to get to that piece too. But the big thing that I'm asking you to do is if you could do this ballot count audit that I passed out, it'll take maybe a couple hours or 2-3 hours of your time. If you could go with somebody else, it'd be best so that there's a pair of you to do this counting. You're counting probably...
And they're going to allow you to go right in and do that.
Well, you have to ask the clerk, and if you have any problem, it's a freedom of information, you have the right.
But that FOIA takes time.
Well, they've changed the amount of time now, it's more limited. Yeah, but if you have a problem, call me. I think most clerks will allow you to get in, they just want to set a time.
Or you gotta go there beforehand.
Hold your hand up, Jim.
You have to contact them, just read the instructions.
Yeah, you have to do it ahead of time, so they know who you are.
Yeah, so you're coming. By the way, did you know that the county next week, August 5th, is having a hearing on a question about whether to hold an election in November. Now, do you know how much elections cost us? If we have election in our county, another election in our county, it's over $200,000. It's about $250,000
No, Ms. Wilson.
to carry out an election. And they want to have an election that's going to raise something like between $500,000 and $600,000 for the purpose of funding the communications for the emergency services, that 800 megahertz system that we've been paying on, that they want to extend the funding for that.
Okay, I'm going to remind you folks that you're not having a conversation with this fellow. You're having a conversation with everybody here and everybody on YouTube. So make sure that your questions are done through this microphone so that everybody else can hear the question and appreciate Michael's answers. So raise your hand first, and I'll come to you. Michael, go ahead.
Well, I was just mentioning this issue that the county is having, where they're planning to have an election in November. It's going to cost us $250,000 to have the election, whether they win or lose. And the main item on the ballot is to raise our taxes. And I'm suggesting that maybe if you want to influence them, you might want to call your county commissioner or go to the meeting on, I think it's August 5th, and say you don't want to have an election, a new election. It could very easily be just done in March. There's already an election scheduled in March. We have 3 elections scheduled next year. There's the March election, there's the actual primary in the summer, and then there's the fall election, when we're going to select a president, presumably.
Uh-oh, you nailed it.
What?
I think they're suspending him. He said presumably.
Presumably, who knows?
All
That's
right.
what we're supposed to do. So, I'm just mentioning that that's a place that you might want to intervene if you want to make some phone calls.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you.
Is there anything else? Any other questions? Well, everybody give Michael a big hand. You know what? There's a lot of things that we and Michael probably wouldn't agree on politically. Michael.